My name's Jamie, and I've bartended for about, I've been in hospitality for 11 years. I've bartended for the past 8. My previous bar I worked at was called the Linden Room in Hayes Valley. I'm actually taking a break from bartending because I went back to school for this next semester. So getting a master's degree, and so I'll bartend again eventually, but right now I'm taking a little break.
When it comes to giving away the free shots, or when it comes to give a compliment to a customer, how do you go about it? What comes to your mind and how do you decide?
Well, it depends on like the place, kind of the place I'm working at, but if it's like a nicer place, sometimes like an Amaro shot will be given to a regular customer, or like as like a sort of goodbye, thank you. If they're really cool and they're nice. But then in more like party bars I've worked in, like, like shots get kind of passed around, but like if people ask for it, then you definitely don't give them free shots. But it's always at the discretion of the bartender.
Yeah, I like the point that you keep a tap on your regular customers. So you do understand that who is coming frequently and when exactly there is a need to uplift the customer. Exactly.
Yeah. Usually if it's like a second or third visit and you can tell that they like really like the place, you can like drop a cheeky as a parting gift. But it's also good because it's like Amaro's better for that, because it's like low commitment because it's like less alcohol. So because a lot of times if you just give somebody a shot, they might be like too intimidated and you could be potentially like ruining their night if they're not ready for a shot. So Amaro is good for that reason, because it's just like low ABV.
Ever happened to you that there is a conversation which looks like a never-ending conversation at the bar and you're really busy and you just want to cut the conversation? Be it a regular customer, be it a new customer, be it somebody who's very curious to know what are the cocktails that are famous at your bar. So how do you take care of these lengthy conversations? How do you plan to cut them off?
It actually is really hard because it's like you keep the conversation going, but like I think it's just like you have to acknowledge that you're in your workflow, and then so you just have to kind of force them to accept that. So you just have to walk away and come back and keep like peppering into the conversation. So the long conversation might actually last a really long time. You're not really cutting it off, but you're just like slowing the cadence of your responses and staying focused on your job. In my experience, they're like really pumped on that, and everyone totally understands if you're like busy behind the bar that they can't expect your entire attention. But generally, I try not to cut off conversations. I just kind of let them marinate for a second while I do other things, and then come back and keep checking back in with the same guest.
Any request which is super bizarre or super weird? For example, people asking about less ice because they think that it takes up the alcohol space. So any sort of such request that you see often at the bar?
But that's generally people who are like less bar savvy. I mean, the harder requests are when like people come in, like a random cocktail they heard on the internet and then they want it from you. And like I generally know most cocktails that people are going to hear about, but then like that's like the most difficult request. So you have to like look it up or something like that.
So a couple of small hacks, if you can just brief about like how do you do it? So for example, how Jamie's response is usually. So when it comes to selling something, for example, your own signature cocktail. So when it comes to selling something like your personal favorite cocktail or something which you think that the customer might like. So how do you go about it? So for example, if somebody is entering and they're ordering, but you want to just tell them that this is better than that, if that is their taste. So how do you go about it? What is your pitch usually?
I try to take a didactic approach towards like service. So not like a deductive approach. So it's like I present the guest with like, do you like spirituous or refreshing? And then that basically means like shaken or stirred, or like citrusy or boozy. Those are all kind of synonymous. And depending on where they go, then I would have my suggestions in each of those categories. I kind of approach it in the same way I would approach like selling wine in that way. And then once I've asked a few questions to sort of like deduce where their taste is, I'd make a suggestion of my personal favorite from that. And that usually works really well, and people like that.
Got it. But do you do it often with the first timers, or do you prefer to do it with your regular customers, because you know that the trust has been there, they kind of like the vibe, they kind of like the bar, they personally interact with you? So do you find it easier to pitch it to the regular customers and not to the first timers? Any difference out there?
I've also like, it's all about cultivating your relationships with the guests. So if there are regulars that you get on a first name basis with, and you get to know them, oftentimes I found that guests will ask me to just make something off the top of my head. And then they like actually sort of relinquish their taste, and they just want to know what I want to drink. So I just make drinks but it also depends on what kind of supplies you have at the establishment too. But yeah.
So how is Jamie at the bar? So if you have to define yourself at the bar, like how are you? How do people would define you as a person that they see at the bar? So any characteristics that you think that is important for a person who is in the bar, a bar manager or a bartender, and something which you have tried to develop all along the year, and you see that people defines you by those characteristics or by those traits?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to be like maintaining a level of like warmth, I think, is like the best word to describe good service is just like being warm to customers or to guests for that matter. And then try to expect what people are looking for, and offering them like a delightful surprise that it's like because a lot of times people are just expecting like for a drink, and they're maybe not looking at the bartender as like a person, but if you can kind of break that somehow and then like get that connection, even like a 30-second interaction, that's sort of like the best way to go about it.
When it comes to building yourself or building your brand, as you said, that people might not at first would pay attention to the bartender, but to the drink or to the choice or to the vibe. So when we talk about an individual, so how, apart from being a full-time professional, what are the other things that you keep doing to uplift your game? So for example, there are a lot of people who are getting into this thing of influencing. They try to keep it update on their Instagram. They try to be in the community. So what are the side things that you do apart from just being present at the bar?
I'm not currently doing any side hustles in the hospitality industry, but I would say that for people who are beginning their career, like when I first started a long time ago, I basically read a lot of like bar books, and that sort of gave me the vocabulary and the language of bartending that enabled me to like move my career forward pretty rapidly, which was, and like the quote that I like sort of remembered most from the Death and Co book was that like the difference between, pouring ingredients into a glass and making something that's a cocktail is the difference between knowing like the fundamentals of cocktail bartending and having a rich background of history versus just like winging it. And I can't remember exactly the quote, but they basically said it's the difference between novelty and innovation. So if you want to be innovative in your career, like it's really important to have a super strong fundamental backdrop of just like what the craft skills are. And then everything else just follows from there. Because like when you have that, people see it and then
True.
They're just going to gravitate toward it because you just know. So that's sort of my advice to anyone. Just learn as much as you can about cocktail.